Good morning, everybody. Welcome. We are on page 127 for Chayei Sara, which I always have to point out that I just love this because it's, I know I say it every year, but Sarah lives to be 127 years old, and we start on page 127, so it's a wonderful coincidence, right? Or they set it up that way, one of the two.
Must be gematria for that.
Yeah, well, that's what it is, right? Good. So here is another place where we have the rabbis seeing something that happened before have an effect now. That the end of last week's parsha was Akedat Yitzchak, the binding of Isaac, and here we start right off with the death of Sarah, and the rabbis attribute one to the other, that is because of the Akedah, and there's different midrashim as to how Sarah found out that Satan is involved, and that sort of starts to bring the question, what is Satan in Jewish tradition? Is the adversary, the one who sort of instigates things, and so comes back and tells Sarah, do you know where Abraham and Isaac went? Like, what they're up to? And then she passes from that news. But especially when she sees Abraham coming back, because the story, if we look at it closely, he comes back by himself. So then she assumes that he's carried out this act of sacrificing Isaac. If she waited long enough, she would find out that it's called Akedat Yitzchak, the binding of Isaac, not the slaughter of Isaac, because he never ends up being slaughtered. So it's, but that's how we call it many, many years later. George, you want to start us off? No, sorry, David, you're right here. George, sorry.
Sarah's lifetime.
Right.
The span of Sarah's life came to 127 years. Sarah died in Kiryat Arba, now Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham proceeded to mourn for Sarah and to bewail her. Then Abraham rose from beside his dead and spoke to the Hittites, saying, I am the resident alien among you. Sell me a burial site among you, that I may remove my dead for burial. And the Hittites replied to Abraham, saying to him, Hear us, my Lord. You are the elect of God among us. Bury your dead in the choicest of our burial places. None of us withholds his burial places from you for burying your dead. Thereupon Abraham bowed low to the people of the land, the Hittites, and he said to them, If it is your wish that I remove my dead for burial, you must agree to intercede for me with Ephron, son of Zohar. Let him sell me the cave of Machpelah that he owns, which is at the edge of his land. Let him sell it to me at the full price for a burial site in your midst.
Okay, great. So here's the setup. Welcome, come on in. We're on page 127 and 128. Thank you to whoever went and got Chumashim this morning. I forgot that we had taken them. I brought them back down to the sanctuary. So here Sarah passes, and the need for a burial site for her. And Abraham starts to speak with the people amongst whom he's living, the Hittites, and says the specific line, Ger v'toshav anochi imachem. That a resident ger, a ger is a
Very intrusive.
It's an interesting phrase. We speak in Judaism now of a ger toshav as somebody who's, and in rabbinic literature, somebody who is living amongst the Jewish people, but isn't Jewish, right? Sometimes there's been talk in terms of the intermarried, interfaith families, right? That maybe we should look at that as a similar kind of situation, right? As somebody who is living in a Jewish world, living in some ways living a Jewish life, but hasn't gone through a formal conversion. So here he is. He's sort of saying that I'm walking this line, right? I'm a ger, I'm a stranger, and I'm a toshav, I'm a dweller amongst you, right? But yet I need a place to bury my dead. And that phrase, here you go, is the first thing that we're going to look at here. A couple of different texts. This first one is from the Maggid of Dovno, see how he looks at this. George.
I wanted to ask you a question.
Uh-huh.
It sounds like they are going out of their way to be deferential to him.
Yes.
To the hospital and offer him a place. And then his line sounds irrelevant to what he's just heard from him.
Yes, and
they haven't suggested he goes someplace else. They suggested just the opposite.
Right, and I don't know. There was one of these. Oh, I didn't bring the book with me. There was one of the texts that I was looking at that did look at that, about how they kept saying to him. They kept calling him Adonai, right? And he doesn't respond with that same kind of those kinds of honorifics to them. So yeah, it was an interesting thing.
So where are we, 10?
No, on the handout.
Okay.
So it looks at, up at the top, we've got the initial verse, Gerva Toshav Anochi, I'm a resident alien among you, and that's the piece that the Maggid of Dovno starts to look at in the box.
Right. So that I may remove my debt from her. I am a resident alien among you. A righteous person is like a foreigner in this world. Their essence and purpose is obligated to this world. Follow the words of Pirkei Avot. Prepare yourself in the vestibule so that you may enter the banqueting hall.
Okay, so it seems like, right, what are we doing here, quote unquote, here in this world? Right, we're preparing ourselves for the next world, right? Prepare yourself in the vestibule, in the hallway, right, in the entranceway, so that we can then enter into the banquet hall, the Olam Haba. Exactly what is Olam Haba? That's going to be lots of other conversations, right? But that there's some idea that what we do now sets us up for that time. Go ahead.
Okay. But the wicked thinks of themselves as a resident in this world, and it doesn't raise up in their minds that they would need it sometime to say goodbye to this world.
Right. So a righteous person, a tzaddik, really understands, right, that you're preparing yourselves for the next world. The Rasha is just thinks this is it, right? This is it, and I'm going to not even think about what comes next. Right. Go ahead.
Thus, when Abraham said to the people of Chet, I am a resident alien among you, he meant the two of us, me and you, we are visitors and residents. There are two worldviews, separate from each other in beliefs and opinions, and therefore give me the gravesite for myself, who is distinct and separate from you.
Okay, that's it. So the last line took me in a different direction. But before we got to the last line, it seemed like, right, Avraham is saying, or he's attributing Avraham as saying, I'm a resident alien among you, meaning both of us are, he's pointing out to Chet, right? He's pointing out to the Hittites and saying, we're both in this situation, right? Even if you don't, even if you, right, are living for this world, right, and I'm thinking about Olam Haba, the reality is that it's going to happen to both of us. So I sort of saw that as Avraham being a teacher, right, somebody trying to influence somebody for the good, and encourage them to see things in the same way that he does. But then he goes on and says there are two worldviews, right? Really, the way I see things and the way you see things, and therefore give me the gravesite for myself, who is distinct and separate from you, right? And that's where he gets to the ger v'toshav, right? I'm sort of here with you, but I'm different. I'm a ger as well, and a need for you to allow me, right, to have this place to bury Sarah.
No such thing as black and white.
There's no such thing as
Black and white.
a black and white. No, there isn't. Right, there isn't. And in this context, you mean that Abraham's view and the Hittites' view, there's probably some happy medium,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, sure. Okay.
So is this why we have separate Jewish cemeteries which are distinct from other people?
I'm not sure that this is why, but there, I don't necessarily know. I'd have to go back and look and see. I mean, other than the fact that there were just different burial practices and expectations, the way that Jews were treated in lots of different places and needing to be separate. So I'm not sure exactly why that, how that is. But just there's a sense of consecrated land, of having Jews with Jews. So, okay, and on the back page, is another one looking at the same section. Go ahead, Len.
I am a stranger and a settler with you, a stranger having come from another land, but I have settled down amongst you. The Midrash's explanation is, if you agree to sell me the land, then I will regard myself as a stranger and will pay for it. But if not, I shall claim it as a settler and will take it as my legal right, because the Holy One, blessed be He, said to me, unto thy seed I give this land.
Okay, so here, right, is in some ways Rashi's explanation, saying that I am a ger, and so you should sell it. I'll buy it from you, right? But he's also saying vitoshav, and I think Rashi's issue is the vav, right? Because as I said, when we have this term in Judaism, it's a ger toshav, right? It's the vav isn't there. So here he's looking, I think he's got a problem with the vav being there, saying I'm a ger and a resident, right? And so why have both of those? And Rashi's explanation then is, as a ger, you should sell it to me, right? As a stranger, I'm not from here, please sell it to me. But as a toshav, meaning as God has given me this land, right? And I am here, right? I'll take it as my legal right? It's not up to you. It's already been promised to me, and we can understand and hear that same language in political views about Israel to this day, right? That this is ours, and so we see Rashi bringing that out within this conversation going on with the Hittites. Okay, go on, Len.
It is possible to explain, according to the Midrash, that in the merit of the 10 tests that Abraham, our father, was tested, he merited to inherit the lands of the 10 peoples. And here, one of the 10 tests was
sorry.
to purchase
Oops, there you go.
Even though God promised him all of the land within which is the land of the Hittites, he needed to purchase the gravesite from the people of Het. If so, why didn't the people of Het immediately agree to give him the gravesite? They did. It would not have been thought of as a test, and Abraham would only inherit 9 lands, and possibly a portion of the people of Het would not have come to him. And this is the intention of the words. If you desire to give me the gravesite of your own free will, I will be like an alien amongst you. But if you refuse to give the portion to me and give it to me by way of the test, I will be a resident and take it in court, for due to the test I was given that the land is an eternal inheritance.
So I apologize for the typos there. Those are all mine. So here, right, this is coming, as it says, according to a midrash that says that Abraham, God tested Abraham 10 times, right? And in fact, when it gives us the story of Isaac in last week's Parsha, it says, right, I'm going to test Abraham. But then the rabbis see that there were 10 tests, and there's different lists that you can find as to what they are. One of them's in Pirkei de Rebbe Eliezer, which is basically a commentary on Pirkei Avot, and it goes through. And one of the tests is acquiring a burial plot for Sarah. So he's saying here that if that's one of the tests, then it couldn't just be this easy thing that the people just sort of say, okay, go ahead, have this land. There needed to be some real struggle or action that Abraham had to take in order to pass that test, because then the reward for passing the tests, according to the Midrash, is to have the land of these 10 different parts of the land. And if he hadn't passed that test, then he wouldn't have merited to get that part of the land. And so here we see at the end of it, right, is saying in some ways similar to the Rashi, right, is that if you want to give it to me, right, of your own free will, then I'm like an alien, right? I'm a ger who's come in and you've decided you'll sell it to me, right? But if not, then I will be like a resident, and I'll fight you for it, right? But I'll bring it up in court, right? We'll have a because a ger wouldn't have the rights to challenge him in court, right? Whereas the resident would be able to. And either way, right, then it's seen as passing that test, right, of really having more of a struggle to get the land as opposed to them just giving it to him. Right.
Him saying that he's a resident is only because God has given him this land. So the Hittites have been.
Well, that's according to Rashi, right? According to Rashi is that. But I mean, the if you will, a simpler explanation is just that he's living there, right? So he's a foreigner, but he's also living amongst them and had been for some time, and right. So I think that it's a simpler reading, but Rashi reads into it certainly more of a spiritual and at that point, I don't know, giving some sort of claim, right, to Abraham, to the land as well, because it's been promised by God. Right. Okay, Edith, verse 10, in the Chumash, page 128, verse 10.
Ephron was present among the Hittites. So Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham in the hearing of the Hittites, all who enter the gate of his town, saying, No, my lord, hear me. I give you the field, and I give you the cave that is in it. I give it to you in the presence of my people. Bury, you are dead. Then Abraham bowed low before the people of the land and spoke to Ephron in the hearing of the people of the land, saying, If only you will hear me out, let me pay the price of the land, except if from me that I may bury my dead there. And Ephron replied to Abraham, saying to him, My lord, do hear me. A piece of land worth 400 shekels of silver, what is that between you and me? Go and bury your dead. Abraham accepted Ephron's term. Abraham paid out to Ephron the money that he had named in the hearing of the Hittites. You are 400 shekels of silver at the going merchant's rate.
Okay, keep going.
Ephron land in Machpelah near Mamre, the field with its cave and all the trees anywhere within the confines of that field passage. to Abraham as his possession in the presence of the Hittites of all who enter the gate of his town. And then Abraham buried his wife Sara in the cave of the field of Machpelah, facing Mamre, now Hebron, in the land of Canaan. So the field with its cave passed from the Hittites to Abraham as a burial site.
Okay, great. So here we have, right, the continuation where Ephron stands up and says, I've got a field, I've got a cave, a burial place, and you can have it. And Abraham says, no, I'm not going to just take it, I'm going to pay you for it. And Ephron says, what's 400 shekels between us for a piece of land, right? And the rabbis don't look favorably on Ephron for this, that he might be gouging Abraham, but Abraham accepts his terms very quickly, but wants to do it on the up and up, wants to do it in front of all the people of the town, so that everybody knows that this has happened. And just thinking now back to our scholar in residence who was just here, right, about the JNF buying all the land in Israel, and knowing that there are as he even said, right, there's parts that they bought, and there's parts that the Arabs vacated at the War of Independence. There's parts that they got kicked out of. So there's a lot of different things, but at least parts of it, right, where JNF came and bought it, right, and wanted to have actual claim, right, to the land, as opposed to coming in as an imperial, conqueror type of thing. So we see that here as well, Abraham wanting to make sure that the deal goes through.
Is this the first mention of burial in the Torah?
Yeah, I believe so. When I mean the other death that we have earlier is with Cain and Abel. I don't think there's any mention of burial for Abel, and the ends of Adam and Noah's life aren't detailed all that much. Yeah, so it probably is.
We can assume that this is probably the practice of the area that the people are buried. So it's like the ceremony formal, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is question around that as to whether that was the practice of other groups or not, whether this was a transition period, whether we're sort of in the middle of a transition period, or whether this was something new. It's not really clear, although what we do see is that this is, and we know it from later on as well, that burial then was different, right? Where the body would be placed in a section of a cave, and it would decompose, and later on somebody would come back and gather up the bones, put them in a small sarcophagus, and that would go in another place in the cave. And there's caves that you can go into in Israel where you see this, where you see sort of a large section, and then smaller spaces.
Yeah, because I remember in Hebron there was a structure in which the three patriarchs and their wives were buried. So this would explain it, that they were buried and then replaced into this structure or building.
Well, no, I think the cave would be used for both parts of it, right? The cave would be used for both. Yes, I've never been to Marat Machpelah. I've never been in Hebron, so I haven't visited it. But
a large building was built over what was said to be the site of the cave.
right, well, that's also the case, right?
I
Yeah.
see.
Right, there's right, and we've got other instances of that same type of thing where there's the gravesite of Joseph, and even in Iraq, I think, is of Mordechai and Esther. The question is, are those really, is it historically accurate, or were these traditions that were passed down that those were their burial places? But I was going to say something about something else that you had said. Yeah, I don't remember.
The practice of Hever Kadisha really is a modern thing, right? Probably in response to climate.
Well, I don't know that it's modern. I think that along the way it developed as the community having a responsibility to take care of the dead, and we see that we see some of the different practices that come out, whether it be from Aaron's death, where the people mourn him for 30 days. I think even here, where Abraham is with her and then gets up from her to, right. So there's that sense of developing traditions here as well. But the Chevra Kadisha and the washing, I'm not sure where the Tahara specifically comes from, but I'm sure there's a story that it's pinned to in the Tanakh, in the Bible someplace, but I don't know which one offhand. Yeah. Somebody else is going to make a comment?
Well,
yeah.
He did try to offer it to him.
For free.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you said that the rabbis felt like the price was...
Yeah, so I think that, and then there might even be a comment at the bottom here. Underneath the line, I think is sort of an explanation on 129. Ephron may be pretending to give Avraham the land while hinting at a steep price for it. Such bargaining seems devious and hypocritical. However, custom may have deemed it dishonorable to sell ancestral land, but acceptable to give it as a present to a close friend who presumably would give you a present of equal value. So it's like, I'll give it to you for free, but I'm expecting something else, right? Yes, it's like somebody saying, right? No gifts. You invite you to a birthday party, no gifts necessary, right? Okay, my mom made me put that on the invitation, but I'd really love something. Yeah, right. Right, so you have a little bit of that. And let's see. Although Abraham is God's promise. Right, and then he wants to pay the whole price. And I do know, I remember a long time back and was reading something, trying to translate a text, and it said, Ephraim Harasha, Ephraim the wicked one. And I had to sort of unpack and try and find out, well, why is he considered wicked? And the explanation was this, with this story that he's quote unquote giving it to Avraham, but really he wants him to pay for it, and it's an exorbitant price and that kind of stuff. So that's at least how the rabbis see it. I don't think you really get it directly from the text, but certainly rabbinically they end up understanding it that way. So Raz, page 130, chapter 24.
Abraham was now old, advanced in years, and the Lord had blessed Abraham in all things. And Abraham said to the senior servant of his household, who had charge of all that he owned, "Put your hand under my thigh, and I will make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of earth, that you will not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, among whom I dwell, but will go to the land of my birth and get a wife for my son Isaac." And the servant said to him, "What if the woman does not consent to follow me to this land? Shall I then take her son back to the land from which you came?" Abraham answered him, "On no account must you take my son back there. The Lord, God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from my native land, who promised me an oath saying, 'I will assign this land to your offspring.' He will send his angel before you, and you will get a wife for my son from there. And if the woman does not consent to follow you, you shall then be clear of this oath to me, but I do not take my son back there." So the servant put his hand under the thigh of his master Abraham and swore to him as did.
Great. Okay, so here's the next step. So we've got the birth of Isaac last week, the Akedah. Now Sarah dies, and now Abraham wants to assure the next generation, wants to set things up and prepare Isaac for marriage. And he does so by sending his servant back to the ancestral home, so back to Haran, and there is where he wants him to find somebody from the clan, from the family, and it was still not uncommon these points for cousins to be marrying each other, and we see a couple of those situations here. So he sends his servant, makes him promise that not to have Isaac go to leave Canaan, and so the servant agrees and makes this oath with Abraham. The beginning of the chapter starts off with Avraham Zakein ba b'yamim, and Avraham was now old in days. V'haya beirach Adonai beirach et Avraham bakol, and God blessed Abraham bakol in all things. And the rabbis spend some time looking at specifically that idea of bakol. What is that? Why is that added? Right? It's one thing to say, okay, and God blessed Abraham, right? But why adding bakol? And in the handout, text 3, we'll see one explanation of that. And I'm blanking on your name. Randy. Randy, last name again? Wynn, right? Yeah. Okay, Randy Wynn. Thank you. Go ahead.
And the Lord had blessed Abraham in all things. The truly righteous person does not pray just for themselves, rather for everyone together. Nor do they find satisfaction in being blessed either. In any case, when heaven wants to bless the righteous person, heaven blesses everyone together. And God blessed Abraham because all the blessing was that everyone got blessed. And this is the essence of the blessing of Abraham.
Right. So that there's sort of flip sides to it. One is that a righteous person, Abraham, doesn't look for just blessing for himself, but wants it for everybody. And then the flip side is that when God sends blessing, doesn't just send it to the righteous person, but sort of in the merit of that righteous person, gives it to everybody, b'kol, right? With all. And so I think that's really how he's reading the Kedushat Levi, is reading this b'kol is really like as with, right, with all, that God blessed Abraham with everybody else, but in the merit of Abraham.
The everybody being the people of Israel as opposed to the Hittites.
Yeah, probably, in a traditional viewpoint of it. But everybody that, I mean, we certainly see from earlier, right, the idea is that if those who bless you shall be blessed, right? So those who were in relationship with Abraham, those who, right, so it could be beyond just the family and expanded a little bit more as well. But it's hard to know, really. Right. Great. Okay. Back on 132, we now see what happens with the servant. Up to this point, he's still not named, right? Yeah, still not named at all. Jessica, go ahead on 132, verse 10.
Then the servant took 10 of his master's camels and set out, taking with him all the bounty of his master, and he made his way to Aram Naharaim, to the city of Nahor. He made the camels kneel down by the well outside the city at the evening time, the time when women come out to draw water. And he said, O Lord, God of my master Abraham, grant me good fortune this day, and deal graciously with my master Abraham. Here I stand by the spring as the daughters of the townsmen come out to draw water. Let the maiden to whom I say, please lower your jar that I may drink, and who replies, drink, and I will also water your camels. Let her be the one whom you have decreed for your servant Isaac. Thereby shall I know that you have dealt graciously with my master.
Okay, so he sets up this sign that he's looking for, right? And we could look at it and say that it's an expectation or placing on God, right, to indicate who the right person is by this, or it could just be him looking for certain qualities in a person, and so if there's somebody who I say you need some water, and they say, here, have some, and I'll get for your camels too. That's the kind of person that we want for Isaac. So we really see these two different approaches that could be coming out of Eliezer's request or thoughts here, right? And it's really let me go back to the Hebrew. I guess he says it out loud, right? He says, "Oh Lord, God of my." I thought that it was sort of more internally, but it does seem to be sort of more of an outward thing. Okay, Jessica, go on.
He had scarcely finished speaking when Rebekah, who was born to Bethuel, the son of Milcah, the wife of Abraham's brother Nahor, came out with her jar on her shoulder. The maiden was very beautiful, a virgin whom no man had known. She went down to the spring, filled her jar, and came up. The servant ran toward her and said, "Please let me sip a little water from your jar." "Drink, my lord," she said, and quickly lowered her jar upon her hand and let him drink. When she had let him drink his fill, he said, "I will also draw for your camels until they finish drinking." Quickly emptying her jar into the trough, she ran back to the well to draw, and she drew for all his camels.
Yeah, so really fulfilling what he had set up, and even more so, there's a similar connection to Abraham, where there's a sense of haste, right? Quickly she does this, right? Quickly empties her jar, and she ran back to the well to draw for the camels. So it's not just, okay, I guess I got to do this, right? There's some real anticipation and excitement around it, and wanting to carry this out.
Why do you think that the mention of Milcah by name? She's a woman. Usually they just list, you're the
right.
product of your father.
Right. It would be, I'd have to go back and look at the genealogy, right, and see if Nahor has other wives, right, and wanting to know through, you could say, right, it's this, it's the son of Nahor, but then we don't know from which mother, right, it was, right? So I think that's probably it, but I'd have to go back, one, to find out who the other wives were, and two, what would be the purpose? Why do we want to know that it's coming from her line and not somebody else's? But if we think back, if you think about like the Joseph, with Joseph, right? The rabbis draw some distinctions between the sons that were born to the different mothers, right? And that certainly the ones born to Rachel, right, Joseph and Benjamin, have a dearer place, right? But even beyond that, the rabbis look, and one of the things they look at is the sons of Leah, basically, not only don't treat Joseph very well, but they also don't treat the sons of the handmaidens very well, right? And that's one of the, at least in the Midrash, that the rabbis see as to one of the reasons why they're mad at Joseph, because he then goes and tells Jacob that, the brothers aren't being nice to the sons of your other wives, right? So knowing who the mother was has some importance in it as well. But yeah, I'd have to go back and see why she's specifically singled out for that.
She's mentioned originally in the
Genealogy, right?
Yeah, as being his wife.
Right.
And the daughter of Haran, which...
She's Haran's daughter.
Yeah.
Does the connection to the generation before come through her, and then he marries her? I don't know.
Here says that Nahor also had children from a concubine.
There you go, right.
So the fact that she's from a formal wife gives her higher status.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so there's a note down below about that. There you go. So that's similar to what I was saying before. Great. Okay. boom, 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 boom. We did that. I turned to the page and now I'm not. Okay, great. George, page 134, verse 21.
34.
134, verse 21.
The man, meanwhile, stood gazing at her, silent, wondering whether the Lord had made his errand successful or not.
So that's an interesting thing, right? So she fulfills the requirements, right, of what he expected of her going and fetching the water for him for the camels, and yet he's still got this doubt, right? He's not.
But he doesn't know her genealogy yet.
He doesn't know. So he
she is.
doesn't know. He doesn't know that she's from the family. So that, right, because that is another piece of it that
And he
Abraham.
doesn't know that her father will agree to marry.
Correct. Right,
Well,
and allowed to bring her for her to go back to the land. So all those things are still unknowns as he's preparing for the next step. Okay, go on.
When the camels had finished drinking, the man took a gold nose ring, weighing a half shekel and 2 bands for her arms, 10 shekels in weight.
Okay, great. So there's the necklaces and the rings and all that, but even interesting the phrase when the camels had finished drinking, right? That it wasn't when she finished bringing the water for the camels, right? It wasn't when she thought enough was enough, right? But when the camels had really finished. That's really interesting to see it, how the language is specific about that. Go on, pray.
Pray tell me, he said, whose daughter are you? Is there room in your father's house for us to spend the night?
It would have been nice to get the answer to the first question before he asks the second one. But go ahead.
She replied, I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, whom she bore to Nahor. And she went on, there is plenty of straw and feed at home, and also room to spend the night. The man bowed low in homage to her and said, Blessed be the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, and who has not withheld his steadfast faithfulness for my master. For I have been guided on my errand by the Lord to the house of my master's kinsman.
Okay. So one step, as Ben says, sort of has been fulfilled, knowing that she is from the family line. But there still seems to be some other pieces that we don't know that she's going to go back and all that. So maybe this prayer of thankfulness could be seen as a little bit preemptive if we're trying to follow it through till the end. And maybe it should wait until after the whole agreement is done.
The maiden ran and told all this to her mother's household. Now Rebekah had a brother whose name was Laban. Laban ran out to the man at the spring. When he saw the nose ring and the bands on his sister's arms, and when he heard his sister Rebekah say, Thus the man spoke to me, he went up to the man who was still standing beside the camels at the spring. Come in, O blessed of the Lord, he said. Why do you remain outside? And I have made ready the house and a place for the camels. So the man entered the house, and the camels were unloaded. The camels were given straw and feed, and water was brought to bathe his feet, and the feet of the men with it. But when food was set before him, he said, I will not eat until I have told my tale. He said, Speak then. I am Abraham's servant. He began. The Lord has greatly blessed my master, and he has become rich. He has given him sheep and cattle, silver and gold, male and female slaves, camels and asses. And Sara, my master's wife, bore my master a son in her old age, and he has assigned to him everything he owns. Now my master made me swear to him, You shall not get away a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, in whose land I dwell. But you shall go to my father's house, to my kindred, and get a wife for my son. And I said to my master, What if the woman does not follow me? He replied to me, The Lord, whose ways I have followed, he will send his angel with you and make your errand successful. And you will get a wife for my son, for my kindred, for my father's house. Thus only shall you be freed from my adjuration when you come to my kindred, they refuse you. Only then shall you be free from my adjuration.
Okay, great. So we'll pause there for a minute. So Rebecca goes in, tells the family what's going on, and Lavan very quickly steps in, right? And he is the brother of Rebecca. We'll see him again later on as the father of Rachel and Leah. So again, we see generations, the same family coming in a couple of times. Isaac marries Rebecca, and Jacob then marries Rachel and Leah, who are his cousins as well. So we see that a couple of times, keeping things within the ancestral family. Why do you think we retell the whole story again? The text could have just said, and the servant, told the brother all that had happened, or something like that, right? Why?
How the roots developed with the course of the family, how families created.
Right, I understand that, but why, when Eliezer says, let me tell you what happened, right? It could have just been, and he told the story, right? Right? As opposed to now really telling the whole story again, right? In a text in the Torah that a lot of times has things, not missing, but right, it's
To which it gives
right?
a truth.
Okay, right. It gives the story a little bit more truth, a little bit more truth with a capital T, right?
Yeah.
Of the import of what happened. Great.
Some people say it's different authors. Same way there's two Genesis.
So we have that. That'd be interesting to go and see. I do have a text by Richard Elliott Friedman called Bible, the Sources Revealed, or something like that. And he's got different sources that he sees within the text color-coded in different ways. So we could go and see, is one story from E and one story from J, basically. Those are the two different sources. That'd be an interesting question.
But they say it's detail that's necessary to further the plot. I mean, he tells Rebecca's family how wealthy Abraham is, makes a good case for making this a good match.
Right. So it's not just I came to the well and here she was, but let me tell you about where I'm coming from, who Abraham is, what he's gone through, because they know Abraham, right? He was from their family and he left a long time ago, and there's certainly word that could get back and forth. We see that a little bit with the midrash around Rebecca with Rachel and Leah, where we hear that Leah's eyes are dim. What does that mean? And they say that it's because she cries and cries and cries. Why does she cry so much? Because she knows that there's this family, right, that has Jacob and Esau. And because she's the oldest and Esau's the oldest, she's under the impression that she is destined to marry Esau, right? And she doesn't want to marry Esau, right? And so she cries and cries and cries all the time, and that's why her eyes are dimmed or whatever it is. So there must be some word, right, that goes back and forth between these families, even though they live so far apart. But here he's really taking the opportunity to build up Avraham, right, and what he's accomplished since he's left home, basically. Great. Okay, Ben, go ahead. We're at top of 136.
I came today to the spring, and I said, O Lord, God of my master Abraham, if you would indeed grant success to the errand on which I am engaged, as I stand by the spring of water, let the young woman who comes out to draw, and to whom I say, please let me drink a little water from your jar, and who answers, you may drink, and I will also draw for your camels, let her be the wife whom the Lord has decreed for my master's son. I had scarcely finished praying in my heart when Rebekah came out with her jar on her shoulder and went down to the spring and drew. And I said to her, "Please give me a drink." She quickly lowered her jar and said, "Drink, and I will also water your camels." So I drank, and she also watered the camels. I inquired of her, "Whose daughter are you?" And she said, "The daughter of Bethuel, the son of Nahor, whom Milcah bore to him." And I put the ring on her nose and the bands on her arms. And then I bowed low in homage to the Lord and blessed the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who led me on the right way to get the daughter of my master's brother for his son. And now, if you mean to treat my master with true kindness, tell me, and if not, tell me also that I may turn right or left. Then Laban and Bethuel answered, "The matter was decreed by the Lord. We cannot speak to you good, bad or good. Here is Rebekah before you. Take her and go, and let her be the wife of your master's son, as the Lord has spoken." When Abraham's servant heard their words, he bowed low to the ground before the Lord. The servant brought out objects of silver and gold and garments and gave them to Rebekah, and he gave presents to her brother and her mother. And he and the men with him ate and drank, and they spent the night. When they arose the next morning, he said, "Give me leave to go to my master." But her brother and her mother said, "Let the maiden remain with us some 10 days, and then you may go." He said to them, "Do not delay me, now that the Lord has made my errand successful. Give me leave that I may go to my master." And they said, "Let us call the girl and ask her for a reply." And they called Rebekah and said to her, "Will you go with this man?" And she said, "I will." So they sent off their sister Rebekah and her nurse along with Abraham's servant and his men. And they blessed Rebekah and said to her, "O sister, may you grow into thousands of myriads. May your offspring seize the gates of their foes." Then Rebekah and her maids arose, mounted their camels, and followed the men. So the servant took Rebekah and went his way. Isaac had just come back from the vicinity of Beer-lahai-roi, when he was settled in the region of the Negev. And Isaac went out walking in the field toward evening, and looking up, he saw camels approaching. Raising her eyes, Rebekah saw Isaac. She alighted from the camel and said to the servant, "Who is that man walking the field toward us?" And the servant said, "That is my master." So she took her veil and covered herself. The servant told Isaac all the things that he had done. Isaac then brought her into the tent of his mother Sarah, and he took Rebekah as his wife. Isaac loved her and thus found comfort after his mother's death.
Okay.
What about Hollywood?
Yeah.
little
Oh, yeah. You know, we should pitch it to somebody, make a story, and see about making millions. Yeah. No, it's quite a story. Interesting. First of all, we see in some ways the precursor for Laban getting ready for when he's, when it's his children, Rachel and Leah, that he doesn't just say, "Go ahead," right? He starts to say, let's wait, let's delay. What is it? 10 days or whatever, right? And then when Eliezer says, no, don't delay me, he says, well, let's call the girl and see what she says, right? That he's already in this early stages playing the role of the swindler almost, right? But ultimately Rebekah does agree, and that's also, I think, a pretty progressive thing in the text that they at least our understanding is the woman didn't have much of a say, right? And maybe this is a false option, right? Do you want to go with them, right? But it seems to be giving her a say within this relationship as well. And she agrees, and off they go. When they see Isaac, and she gets down, she veils herself, and we see down at the bottom on 138, sort of in the middle text, right? Her veil. Israelite women normally were not veiled. In the ancient Near East, the veiling of the bride was part of the marriage ceremony, but wives generally went about unveiled. By veiling herself now as a sign of modesty, Rebekah signals Isaac that she is his bride. And we we know that during the wedding ceremony, or prior to the wedding ceremony, is the bedekin, where the veil is placed over the bride by the groom, and a lot of times we attribute that to Jacob and the story with Rachel and Leah, and that he gets tricked and he can't tell who he's with. But there's also connections to here, a sign of modesty and of the relationship between a husband and a wife, that she veils herself there. And also, verse 63, Isaac went out walking in the field toward evening, which the rabbis see that as prayer. Then it's the afternoon. So in a section in the Talmud where they ask about how did we end up with these three prayer services, Shachrit, Mincha, and Mariv, each one of them is attributed to one of the ancestors, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Isaac is attributed to Mincha because here he is toward evening, right, in the afternoon, in the field. What else would he be doing in the field but praying? But that's certainly through the rabbinic eyes. On page 139, was there a comment?
There is a significant omission here.
Yeah.
Eliezer doesn't report to Abraham.
Not formally, no. Other than coming back with.
Yeah, but they see Isaac in the field. She sees him, and they go into the tent, and
right.
And that's it. There's nothing said about Abraham's reaction.
Yeah, you're right. Well, one of the things that we note is that after the Akedah, Abraham and Isaac never talk again. In the text, there's no interaction after the binding between Abraham and Isaac, and so it's very possible that their relationship is estranged at that point.
Yeah,
I mean, Eliezer could still go back to Abraham, absolutely,
who sent
right?
him on this mission.
Right, that's true, but there's no interchange between. It's not like was Abraham invited to the wedding, right?
But on the other hand, Isaac is not consulted when Abraham sends Eliezer in the first place.
No, right. That's the normal where our understanding, at least in the traditional societies where marriages were arranged, right? Here you go. So Abraham sends Eliezer gets permission from Rebekah's family, and they're brought back together. Isaac isn't consulted, although we do find that he's comforted by having Rebekah there after knowing that he was, I don't know if he was still mourning for Sarah's for passing, but certainly found comfort having Rebekah there with him. We then see continuation of Abraham's life. Abraham took another wife, whose name was Keturah. She bore him Zimran, Yokshan, Medan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. Joksha begot Sheba and Dedan. The descendants of Dedan were Ashurim, the Litushim, and the Leumim. The descendants of Midian were Ephah, Epher, Enoch, Abida, and Eldah. All these were descendants of Keturah. Abraham willed all that he owned to Isaac, but to Abraham's sons of concubines, Abraham gave gifts while he was still living, and he sent them away from his son Isaac eastward to the land of the east. And so a similar thing before when it happened with Ishmael, right? Of trying to, in some ways, make a distinction and a distance between Isaac as the heir and the other children. This was the total span of Abraham's life, 175 years, and Abraham breathed his last, dying at a good ripe age, old and contented, and he was gathered to his kin. His sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah in the field of Ephron, son of Zohar the Hittite, facing Mamre, the field that Abraham had bought from the Hittites. There Abraham was buried, and with Sarah his wife. After the death of Abraham, God blessed his son Isaac, and Isaac settled near Be'er Lahai Roi. Then we go on with the lineage of Ishmael. This is the line of Ishmael, Abraham's son, whom Hagar, the Egyptian, Sarah's slave, bore to Abraham. These are the names of the sons of Ishmael by their names in the order of their birth. Nebaioth, the firstborn of Ishmael, Kedar, Abdil, Mibshan, Mishma, Duma, Masa, Hadad, Tema, Jetur, Napish, and Kedma. These are the sons of Ishmael, and these are their names by their villages and by their encampments, 12 chieftains of as many tribes. These were the years of the life of Ishmael, 137 years. Then he breathed his last and died, and was gathered to his kin. They dwelt from Havilah by Shur, which is close to Egypt, all the way to Ashur. They camped alongside all their kinsmen. So here we see the the lineage of Ishmael, which I like the juxtaposition of 12 sons, similar to Jacob having 12 sons, where it's this. There must have been some tradition at the time, understanding at the time, that the beginnings of a tribe, the beginnings of a clan are with 12, right? And there's some parallel there, thus between Ishmael's line and the line of Israel in the later stories. And we know that the Islamic tradition traces back to Ishmael as their ancestor. So similar stories of beginning with 12 tribes. Questions, thoughts?
It says
Yep.
that Abraham died at a good, ripe age.
Yes.
The Hebrew for ripe.
So where was that again? Verse 8. Vayigva v'yamat Avraham b'seva tova.
Shiva Tova.
Seva is old. Is old. When we talk about the lifnei seva takum, to rise before your elders, right? So a good oldness. So the last part is he was gathered to his kins. Yeah, I don't know what the idea of ripe old age. I'm not sure exactly that word.
We also use the term when the corpse is sat too long.
Ripe, yeah. I don't think they're talking about it in that way. Yeah, no, I don't think so. Great.
That's a common English expression.
I know, right, and that's probably just why it was translated that way. But I'm not sure of the which word comes, the idea of ripe age comes from, and how it's used other places. I have to look that up. Very good. Thank you all. Have a great day.